Morning. I first felt at home at Gordon College on an August evening in the late 1980s, the sun sinking and shooting its rays through the windows and across the walls of a dormitory that no longer stands. I was all alone and had just traveled 3,000 miles, my first night of my freshman year, and yet I felt strangely at home. So at home that I stayed here, dwelling in a Gordon College dormitory for the next 10 consecutive years. First as a student and later as a married resident director. During my student years, I felt most at home on the wooded trails in an RA meeting and crammed into what was then the Levita office, a small closet next to the mailroom, along with Rich Obenshane, his dog, and another staff member. As an RD, I felt most at home on the wooded trails in an RA meeting and at one end of a belay rope, shouting, "You can do it!" When the soft body of my ideas, desires, and vocational yearnings, of our ideas, desires, and vocational yearnings began to feel pinched, we knew it was time to look for a new home. Out we crawled, literally, from our HUD dorm basement apartment, as vulnerable as that is, in search of a bigger shell to house our growing dreams. Romania. Dropping our car off at the Salvation Army on Route 1 en route to the airport, we moved to a communist block apartment in a remote Transylvanian coal mining valley halfway across the world. A bit drastic, yeah? But when you find that place that God calls you to, that crossroads where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet, to borrow from Frederick Buechner, even the most drastic move can be a sort of homecoming. At first, we moved to start Romania's first adventure education camp, Levita in Romanian, Viața. Later, we learned we were pioneering experiential education in the country. One of my first experiences of feeling at home in Romania was when a shepherd and 70 sheep passed through and under the ropes course we were building with 12 Gordon College students the summer of '99. The shepherd let the students take turns wearing his special hat, and he grandly toasted us all with a draft of plum brandy he pulled from his pocket, while some of his sheep clumsily negotiated the spider's web. More than 7,000 Romanian young people have been to the Viața camp in the past 12 years. Coming up the mountain, away from their communities, where endemic corruption, apathy, and suspicion reign, these youth experience life as God meant it to flourish. At Viața, young people find a home, a safe and nourishing space for all their most noble aspirations and yearnings of trust, honesty, responsibility, integrity, and compassion. They return to their communities in search of bigger shells to house and grow these noble, God-given dreams. And just as Viața becomes a new home for thousands of youth, I sometimes picture these youth being the walls and roof over and around us and our children. They have become a home for us. I felt at home in Romania when one of our former participants emailed us out of the blue from her social work studies to say thank you. Viața turned the compass of my life to face true north. Every decision I've made since Viața has been shaped by the values I learned here. Pioneering experiential education in a foreign country hasn't always been a cakewalk. Just as living in a poor, post-communist coal mining community isn't always easy day to day. But when I proudly plopped a meaty, eggy, cheese-laden lasagna down before our priest and his wife during a strict 40-day vegan feast, I felt at home when he picked up his fork and lustily dug in, nudging his wife to do the same, choosing my feelings over the dietary laws I defied. And every day when I pull our car into the courtyard of number 5 Tusu Street and walk up the front steps of our home, a beautiful and spacious former bed and breakfast that was bought for us by 125 families and individuals, many of whom are staff and faculty, perhaps sitting in this audience, I know that I am home. Home is a long table on Thanksgiving Day, a steaming turkey that we've grown and harvested ourselves in the middle, and study abroad students and friends seated round.
I want to continue the story for why we have decided to keep Romania as our home, to continue this experiment in global solidarity. And this has to do with the other program we have developed called Impact that Joanna mentioned. You see, when youth came literally down the mountain from our camp on a chairlift, all fired up to be agents of change, they came down to a situation that systematically frustrates any noble intentions. There were no follow-up programs, no Boy Scouts, no Sunday school. A fairly recent poll found that only 1% to 3% of young Romanians were involved in anything extracurricular. Romanians under communism were forced to volunteer. So after communism, any type of volunteering or work for the public good was viewed with disdain, with contempt. And service learning translates into slave learning, which didn't help matters much. Many well-funded international nonprofits came in to solve the problem of civic apathy and learned helplessness in Romania, and they failed miserably. Volunteer centers were set up all over Romania, but no one came, no one volunteered. By living for almost 15 years full-time on the ground in a challenging context, and by applying and extending the methods we learned through our time at Gordon with Levita, we innovated a youth development model that works, meaning that it turns youth into change agents, youth themselves finding and implementing solutions for local community problems. What do I mean more concretely? Youth get together to do fun team-building games, which attracts them to the club. They read Bible or other stories to inspire moral vision for the common good, but they brainstorm and implement projects like these. In a city called Cluj, youth turned this nasty abandoned lot on their school property into a beautiful ecological park. Near where we live in a coal mining region, youth built the very first of a series of outhouses at the entrance to the national park. Prior to these outhouses built by and through the youth, tourists from all over Europe came to visit the famous Redezat National Park, but were assaulted by the sight and smells of human poop and toilet paper everywhere. Our youth decided they can do what none of the corrupt public officials would do, and that is make concrete, even if small, improvements. So they built not one, not two, but eventually 3 outhouses and ecological signs. And today the entrance to Romania's most important national park is clean. We now host Romania's largest youth movement with 150 clubs, each club doing 4 or so projects a year, just like these, and learning all sorts of project management and life skills, such as communication and budgeting and being social entrepreneurs. And speaking of being social entrepreneurs, one project I particularly love involves a cow. Kids wanted to help a local orphanage be more self-sustaining, so they raised money by making Christmas cards together with the orphans, sold them, bought a cow to give to the orphanage so they could have cheap milk, but then, much to everyone's surprise, the cow the kids bought was pregnant, so the gift was doubled. On the strength of projects like these, Impact has left its home in Romania and has found homes in other countries. For example, in Honduras, 15 Impact clubs are transforming youth in gangs in the streets of Tegucigalpa. But Impact is being piloted successfully as an alternative youth ministry model here in the USA as well, out of several churches, led by former study abroad students. And we have other plans. For example, World Vision is implementing our model with an eye to international replication. Brandi and I learned experiential education from these, our stomping grounds, from our 10 years here making a home at Gordon College. We have dedicated, and Lord willing, will continue to dedicate our lives to making a new home, a homemaking of sorts for experiential education in Romania and all over the world, giving a space for youth to become community problem solvers, homemakers, as it were, in their own community based on their own leadership, their own assets, and their own values. I want to close with why I believe experiential education, a problem-solving approach to development, can literally change the world. After decades and decades, experts are realizing slowly that top-down development projects done for people and not by people, just by and large, don't work. As a shorthand here, let's take, for example, the famous development cliche: give a person a fish, feed them for a day, teach them to fish, and feed them for a lifetime. Well, it sounds nice, doesn't it? But what if there are actually no fish in your area? Or the fish are toxic from environmental waste? Development experts have slowly realized that there are no silver bullet solutions. There's no universal fishing program, as it were, for development, but that the upstream issue is actually developing the problem-solving mentality itself, so that local solutions can be found for local problems by local people. And this must be educated in the youth. This leads to a final maxim that I have coined, and humanity will never solve the problem of development without the development of more problem solvers. Thank you, Gordon College and the GEO office. It is an honor to be here, real homecoming, so thank you.